Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Equalizer Season 3, Episode 15. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, the context is this episode, I felt weird because I was going to say, great episode and even saying, interesting things. It feels weird with the context of this episode. This is a rough episode, dude. Because it's one of those things. There's a lot in this show that's realistic, regardless. It's just a reflection of real life and stuff, and that's just a sad thing. And it's just because the story's all too real, and there's too many people. They even gave you the stat at the end: 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men. It's that's scary that it's that frequent, and it's that's most likely just in cases that are reported. What about the ones that go unreported? That is just uber depressing about just makes you go, it's just, this episode's a reminder of God, humans, we suck. But then there's also the thing of reminder of we are also so powerful when we're together and we can look out for each other. So it shows the duality of humanity, of how we can suck, but also the good we can be too. I wasn't expecting the story to turn out the way it did. Because at the beginning we got introduced to Angie and she gets attacked. But then Vi goes to her later for a massage and stuff. I was like, is that going to be her twin sister or something? But I was like, no, they called her Angie. So I was like, what's up with that? And the moment the bruise just showed up, I was like, it's an abuse situation. And especially when her husband shows up, Doug, being like, hey, I brought your favorite food. I was like, oh, okay. And the way she was acting around him. And Vi had a feeling she's like, I don't know. So she ended up talking to Robin, and then Robin got Harry and Mel involved, and looking into him, and Doug seems like a straight up nice guy. Fact is, he actually a lot of loving. Interestingly enough, when you look back on it, a lot of that stuff was mainly about him and his son. But there was also obviously he does a lot of nonprofit community stuff. But Mel was yeah, but that could be him overcompensating for his bad behavior, because this story strikes a chord with both Mel and Vi. Because we learned in Vi's case, I think the signs are already you probably are aware to look for certain signs. So she was already probably naturally picking up on that. Because even Robin because she was thinking maybe I'm off bases here. But Rob was nah, trust your gut and your instincts. And her instincts turned out to be right, because Vi also has personal experience in this. A previous lover of hers named Charles. They got into a big spat and he hit her, and he promised he would never do it again, but she never gave him another opportunity, because that first time he hit me was the last time I got out of that situation. But that's obviously not the easiest thing to do, because a lot of things have to be considered, because the fact is her situation of not saying it's easy. I'm not in no shape or form do I want to say it's easy for someone to walk away in that regard. It is never easy, because you get swept up in the belief this person, they made a mistake, they'll never do it again. So some situations might be slightly easier, and I have to emphasize that, slightly easier, just because because you're not tied down in that situation. But it still doesn't change the fact is you have the emotional connection. I love this person, and they promised they would never hit me. I know they love me, they would never do it again, but Vi didn't give them an opportunity. But even she admits it took all her strength to walk away from that. Angie's even her situations. That's the thing. I shouldn't say it's easier. I just preface that Angie's circumstances are even more complicated. That's just how I should put it, because Angie has a son to think about, and for her, it's that sad not even Stockholm syndrome, but you're right, this person, you make excuses for them, and it's right, especially in her case, it's I can't have my son growing up without a father, because you also don't want to be the parent that's my son adores his father, that's his hero, that's everything. I don't want to be the one that takes that away from my son, and you're going to feel like you broke their hearts, because you're still concerned about her. She's still worried about Doug's heart as well, not just her son's heart. So she's denying everything. But when Vi told her story, she admitted, yes, Doug hits me sometimes, but he promises it's never going to happen again. He never does anything to our son. In fact, I send our son in a room so he never sees it. But Vi's yes, maybe he hasn't hit your son yet, or maybe he will go his entire life never hitting your son. But it doesn't change the fact is that what kind of example does that set that your son Craig sees your husband's going to be the foundation of the type of man he's going to be, and it's like that you don't want him thinking that that's okay, and that negative influence. And it's just like the episode got rougher too because Doug, as they said it later on, is a monster. And that's the thing of like, you're like, well, it's hyperbolized for TV, but I'm like, yeah, some of these angles, a normal abuser wouldn't go through such lengths, but at the same time, it's like, you don't know, like, humans throughout history have showcased what kind of monsters we can be. And someone who's able to do monstrous things to the person they love, there are no bounds to how far they would go and take it. Just because, like, because he feels like he's the one, like, oh, I'm the victim in this situation. You're trying to leave me? Like, he's the victim in this situation. And it's just like, that element just made the episode rougher, dude. The fact is that, he not only hit her, even hit their son, and that was the final straw. And just her, like, because he'd done what any abuser does, made sure the wounds aren't visible. I'm sorry, and then start immediately after apologizing. He blamed her, like, oh, I don't like her. She's like, you've never called him before. He's like, are you calling me a liar? Like, every little thing is setting him off, and she's thinking it's her fault. And she's like, I'm sorry. He's like, you have nothing to apologize for. And that was the final straw, especially with her son, Craig, getting hurt. It's like, I need to get away from him. I need to protect my son. You were right, Vi. So she goes to Vi for help. They're going to talk to Dante about it because Dante can't do too much currently because it is the sad way that the system does work in that regard, where it's on the wife to press charges. I mean, the significant other, because I have to, it's on the significant other in a abusive situation to press the charges, because other than that, the cops can't really step in, and I think too often you'll see a situation where the cops will get there after the fact. It's like, yeah, this was like, there's been calls and stuff ahead of, like, multiple times, and then like all it takes is that person going over the edge even further and killing the person they're abusing. So, but before Angie could pick up Craig from school, Doug showed up, and he literally put her in a oil drum and was going to let her suffocate. You're like, Jesus Christ, dude. Luckily, they were all the team was able to track her down, and they got to her in time. And obviously for her, she's like, the only reason why she's alive is because she focused on Craig. I have to live for him. I can't, like, let him go throughout this life without a mother. So, but Doug went even further. I don't know if that cop he attacked is dead. Like, all we saw was like blood on the other side of that cop. It's like, Jesus, I don't know if he shot that. He didn't have a gun, so he had to have just like hit the cop to knock him out. And he went in there. Cause I was thinking, like, at first I was like, oh, maybe he won't know where to go. Well, he saw Vi coming out the place, so he probably, but I thought he was going to go after Vi first, but he went after Angie. And if Vi hadn't come back, he would have killed Angie, and he came after Vi, and Vi was going to defend herself. But she hasn't, from what we've seen, she hasn't used a gun outside of the shooting range. We saw her go in that one episode, but we don't know if she's been back since. I don't remember. I don't know if she, like, stopped going at all, or maybe she's still been going on the side and we just haven't seen it. I don't know, but that's why she was a little more understandable, once again, about Dee's circumstances of why Dee wanted to train and everything. And he was taunting Vi, being like, oh, you don't have it in you, you're shaking like a leaf. And luckily, Robin showed up when she did, because if she didn't, he would have not only killed Angie, he would have killed Vi too in that moment. And I was just like, that was just, that situation is scary. Like, this is a tense episode in that regard. Once again, it makes it sadder and just like even more like heartbreaking, because how real that is. And Vi shaking up after the experience, because for her it's like, it's a combination of, I was willing to shoot this person, but also the double edge of it of like, I didn't shoot him, but that's also the problem. Like, I wanted to shoot him just to protect myself and protect Angie, to stop him from killing us, but also the fact that she blames herself for not being able to pull the trigger, because it's like, what if this situation comes down, like, I'm supposed to be able to protect Dee, I'm supposed to be able to protect you, and Robin has this honest conversation with her where it's like, not pulling the trigger can be just as traumatic as pulling the trigger. And it's that there's enough violence in the world, and she's like, you not having it in you to pull the trigger isn't a bad thing. Because obviously, like, she was like, so what are you going to tell me about the fact that you're packing? And she's like, you know, ever since you got abducted, which obviously Rob's like, I wish you had told me, but at the same time, with everything between her and Dee now, it's like, I completely understand. Like, Dee needed to feel safe, you needed to feel safe, so I'm not going to chastise you. I completely understand. And her, like, holding Vi at the end, that's what really was choking me up, was when, like, Vi dropped the plate and she was just, like, shaking and just like, I don't know what happened. It's like, because she feels like if that time ever came again, how do I know I'll be able to pull the trigger to protect my family? And that's what's really, like, weighing on her in this regard. But also, like, would I been able, like, if I had pulled the trigger, I would have taken a human life, but I didn't pull the trigger, and I could have died. Like, that's all rushing through her at once. But even Robin saying this poignant line of, she wished it wasn't as easy for her. I mean, she's killed more people, not even just people with the CIA, obviously even doing the equalizing job. She's killed people, and it's not like it doesn't bother her, but it is something easy. Like, you know, pulling the trigger, like, she has the discipline to know when and when not to pull the trigger, but that doesn't make it easier, you know, killing someone, but it's easy for her to pull the trigger, and she wishes it wasn't so easy. So her ending on the episode with her holding Aunt Vi like that was, like, beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. That actually coincides with her hanging out with Dee this episode, where Dee and her are hanging out, and she's teaching her surrounding awareness. And it's like, right, when you go into it, well, you know, always, like, be on, like, your surroundings. Like, a big part of self-defense is being able to kind of, like, judge and equate, like, everything around you and make sure that you're, you know, you get a good lay of the lands. Hey, you're in a place, never have your back to the wall. I mean, never have your back to the door, always have your back to the wall, so you always have, like, a 180-degree view of, like, all right, there's nothing behind me, I can always look forward, always find your exits. And also, like, you know, observing people. It's like, okay, you know, you need to be able to kind of read the people around you. Like, the woman they read was like, hey, she's meeting someone she doesn't want to. It's an old friend that she wanted to present, like, oh, I'm doing good, like, I'm doing better than what I am. And it's like, oh, it's a rich friend in a new zip code. And it's like, oh, I want to show you that I'm in a better position. So there's that. And then, like, and I also love that they did a good job of, like, Rob is like, yo, let me show you everything. Like, here's you out in the open. Here's, like, okay, here's a more confined space where you have that 180 degrees. But now let me take you to, like, a park where it's a full 360. You don't have eyes in the back of your head, so you have to use all your other senses to kind of get a lay of the land. Always, like, listen, smell, and feel like get a good sense of what's going on. Then, once you have a good sense of what's going on, you always have to pay attention to remember, like, okay, what has been consistent and what's changed. And that gives you an idea of, like, okay, something in the environment's changed. I need to be a little more up front, but I need to be more on edge. But also, you can't get so lost in those senses you don't forget about sight. You also got to focus on what's in front of you as well. There was a guy that was walking up that's like, okay, he's angry, but is he just someone having a bad day? Is he going to try and attack you? And then Dee is trying to, like, decide, like, okay, while she's talking to her mom, she's saying, like, oh, we could do this, we could do that. And then the guy, like, walked past him. Like, obviously there was no problem, but it's still a thing of, while she was trying to figure out what to do, like, tactically to take him down, like, what if he has a gun or whatever. But Robin teaches her, like, there are times where you have to run. Because that guy because it has to also be accounted for, the guy is, like, a foot taller than you. He's got, like, 100 and some pounds on you. Like, there are situations where you need to run. Like, being able to examine a situation and seeing whether or not a tactical retreat is necessary is an important part of self-defense as well. But because of what happened to Vi, it's another lesson she's teaching Dee, that there are circumstances, like, there are times when that fight or flight happens, that it is important to flight. It is important to run. But there are situations where you can't run. Like, Vi was put in a situation she couldn't run, because if she did, she would have been leaving Angie to die. So it's like, yeah, like, it is something to also consider as well. So sometimes you are backed into a corner and you have to fight like hell to get through it. So powerful, powerful lessons. And I do love that this whole situation has brought Dee and Robin even closer. I always had a tight enough relationship. Obviously, there have been some rocky moments, but that's with any relationship. But they're even closer with everything that because Robin's able to be fully honest with Dee, and it's like helping her train and stuff like that too, kind of making her better prepared for the world. It's like, I wish I didn't have to teach her this stuff, but it is a reality that she has to deal with, that I have to deal with. But also, I want her equipped and prepared to deal with all of this. So you have that element of it. But she also reminded Dee, like, remember, like, you're not alone, that, you have people there for you, and that's something Robin and Vi also have. It's like, right, we have a good system of people around us that we don't have to worry about kind of going it alone. That never forget that I'm always going to be here for you. I'm always going to want to spend time with you. I'm always going to be there if you need me. And we've got a good system of, like, it's not just me. Vi's going to be there for you. You got Harry and Mel. You even got Dante. So I think that was just all beautiful, and just like, it's kind of a nice lesson that I know eventually time will come where Dee will have to enact all that she's learned from Rob and Mel. Speaking of Mel, circling back, her friend, I'd actually forgot to talk about this earlier, but tying back into the Vi thing, I brought it up, but I didn't finish it, is Mel has been in a similar circumstance, like in the regards of, she had a friend that her and her friend group were happy for this friend of hers, Tracy, because she met a good guy, but it's like, right, they noticed the bruises, but by the time, like, Mel was ready to act, her friend disappeared, and she constantly checks the obituary because she's like worried, like, okay, well, if I'm going to wake up one day and find my friend dead, I haven't been able to hear from her in so long. And luckily, Harry was able to track her down. She got remarried. That's why Mel couldn't find her. And her abusive ex died in prison like a month ago. And now Tracy started to post online because for the first time in forever, she finally feels safe because he's gone now. The same thing I'm sure is in Angie's case. That's still going to be rough. But, the whole point was like, right, here's a bank account to help her get on her feet, but also letting Angie know, once again, that conversation about with Dee and Vi of, like, you're not alone. You've got people here vibing, like, I'll check on you from time to time, make sure you're okay. But yeah, like, Doug is gone, and it's like kind of a good thing because, he would have been locked up for a long time, but it's also like, that's at least one less worry. Like, she can take a breath now knowing that he's gone, so. But, and Mel's able to breathe a little easier for the first time in a long time, knowing, like, okay, Tracy's okay. So, And finally, another angle to this episode is Dante going after Lolo. Ultimately, there's a new commanding officer, and she wants to change stuff. We haven't gotten to it this episode, but I definitely get the vibes, like, she might not be so receptive to Dante having such a close relationship with the Equalizer. It should be fine considering the DA kind of signed off on it, but to be fair, it's like Rob still doesn't work in an official capacity. It's still super unofficial. She's almost like a consultant, but not even an official consultant. So I can definitely see her having an issue, like, because she doesn't like the way Dante operates. I can definitely see that becoming an issue later on. I thought that would have been something we tackled this episode, but with conjunction with everything that went down this episode with Lolo, I can tell that in conjunction with probably with his relationship with Rob is probably going to put him in a complicated spot, but we'll see. The timing's also interesting, too, that you get a new captain just as you put in this inquiry about Lolo. Because he ended up confronting Lolo and ended up getting his badge and his gun stolen. And Lolo's like such a smug guy about it because he's like, oh, what happened to Manny? Oh, too bad. I'm going to hold on to your badge and your gun. Freeze. It's like yo. You're lucky Dante didn't come up with some backup to, like, take your ass down, like, with Rob and Mel to back him up, but obviously he wants to handle this in a more official capacity of, like, handling things, but even that was him handling that off duty, so that got him chastised even more of, like, right, you were doing that, you were also told by Hutchinson's to back up, but it's like, no, this guy hurt a friend of mine. It's like, yeah, but yes, there's the element of that's the thing of like, yes, this is a cop that we follow. We know how much of a good guy Dante is, so we trust him when it's like, yeah, it might be a little conflict of interest because your friend was involved in this situation. He was hurt, so you're a little biased in this situation. You're too close to it. But it's like, if this was any other cop, we'd kind of want them, because it's like, yeah, your closeness can blind you to certain things because you went into that situation without backup, and that cost you your badge and your gun, which immediately you're like, the problem is he could go off and do something bad with that gun, which isn't to say they wouldn't have been able to get access to a gun regardless, but the last thing you want is him doing some bad with that gun, which is still potentially at play because he could have given it to one of his boys or something, so that could be circulating on the street. So like Dante's gun could end up being used in a crime, and that could be something that Dante has to deal with later. But like I said, I brought it up last episode. Like, the fact is that Hutchins or whatever, that other cop being like, yo, I need you to back off this case, that like this is our jurisdiction. But for Dante, it's like, not only did they shoot at Manny, he's putting drugs on the street. Doesn't seem like anyone's doing anything. Now that they got this new commanding officer too, feels a little like the timing's just a little too perfect. Maybe I'm reading way too much into it, because last episode my theory was either he's a small fish in a larger pond. They want to use him because they're going after like the infrastructure, maybe his supplier and stuff like that. He's a low-level dealer. They're bigger fish we need to go after. But that's also the problem. When you let the little fish do their thing, the bodies can rack up. Of yes, you'd be doing more good taking, but it's like, can't we do both? It's a numbers game type of situation of which one's the greater and which one's the lesser, like the lesser evil versus the greater evil conversations. Like, both are pretty evil, but those degrees of evil play a role in things. So, but like I said, my other theory was maybe there's a corruption thing going on. Either way, Jackson hit Dante up. Was like, yo, Lolo's about to leave town, so Dante felt like if I don't do this, he's going to disappear. So I'm definitely not going to be. I'm got to go after him now. Lolo tried to jump to the next roof, ended up falling to his death and dying, which is going to blow back on Dante, because it's like, right, for one, you should have never been there in the first place. Two, I told you to back down, so this is on you. He's going to probably suffer the ramification because those cops are going to be mad. It's like, well, if you would fill Dante in at the bare minimum about what this was about, instead of just playing the jurisdiction game, then maybe he would have been a little more I don't think it would have changed anything, but he would have probably approached this a little differently, knowing what was in play. But he's definitely going to suffer some backlash for this. So we'll ultimately have to wait to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good